All right, this is part 2 of worst design mistakes. My name is Medora, I use they them pronouns, and I make videos about home design. I just moved into a new apartment, so if you're interested in any sort of room makeovers or general home design content, subscribe below. If my audio sucks in this video, it's just the 6-year-old children who live upstairs. I can't do anything about it. Number 1, wallpaper slash tile slash any sort of pattern that is too high contrast. So think black and white. Or almost black and almost white, you know. Anything like that, if there's too much contrast, it's just so harsh on your eyes. Kind of like this light that is blinding me, but that's okay. I love this specifically because it is relatively high contrast, except it's a blue instead of, a black, and it's not even a particularly dark blue. It's like a mid-tone blue. It just reads as high contrast because it's paired with white. Coda. Oh, hi. Thank you. What I really love about this photo, while it is, again, relatively high contrast with the brown and the white, there's variation in the brown tones, so it's not just dark brown against stark white, and the white isn't a stark white. It's more of like a creamy off-whitey ivory. Looking at this space, this rug is a perfect example of what I would consider too high of contrast. It's just so stark, and I think it doesn't help that this rug, while it's intentional, I don't think it's good that this rug has that line down the middle and then the stripes are kind of off. It feels very jarring and upsetting to me. So this is one situation that I think is an exception to the rule. This tile is very high contrast, but the reason that it works is because there's this medium toned gray in there to kind of act as a buffer in between the white and the black. And then there is actually also this tile down on the bottom floor here, which also works because there's not only big areas of white and black, but there are some smaller lines in between there breaking up the darkness, making it not quite as harsh. But I think the main reason why this works is that it's a relatively traditional space. You've got the border around the tiles, it's going up a big grand staircase. The pattern on this couch, I think, is a very good example of how you can have a pattern that is not as high contrast, and it really fits within the color scheme of the entire room in a way that makes sense. Like the darkest darks, it looks like there is either a very dark brown or a black in there, but the lightest color is like a dark tan. And then there's a lot of darker, but not quite black elements within the rest of the room that really help muddy up the contrast in that print to make it not quite as intense. Number 2. You're gonna hate me for this one. I hate me for this one, but not giving yourself enough time. This can take years, if not decades, and it is an intense, long, infuriating process. But if you stick with it, it will be worth it. The best homes are ones that look thoughtful and intentional and reflective of the people who are living there, without looking like a designer came in and styled it for a photo shoot. And that takes really knowing yourself, which just takes time. I don't necessarily want to go into the specifics of every single photo here, because I feel like that's against the point of what I'm trying to say. All of these spaces look like the people who live in them know themselves really well. They know what they want, they know what they like, they know what they need, and they know what they don't need. One specific shout out is that I really love this random table with the books on it. I feel like that's something most people would never think to put in their homes. And also, most people probably don't have space to put that in their homes. But it's just such a unique way of displaying books that it makes me think that whoever lives here just really understands what they want out of life. The third mistake is thinking that your design will ever be finished. Sure, you can have an interior designer come into your home, pick out a nice couch, style your coffee table, find a layout for your bedroom that works really well. But I personally feel like interior design is a deeply personal practice that ends up with an external expression of your internal growth as a person, which obviously is never finished. This space feels very much like a first house. It looks like they invested in a really beautiful bed frame. They've got some art that, matches this duvet cover set thingy that they've got going on. And then the chair and especially this drum lampshade, they look like they're remnants from a previous life, maybe when they were renting and drum shades were kind of in. Yeah, the first thing that I would change about this room is that lampshade. Most people are just kind of working with what they got, and that makes sense. It fits with the color scheme, and yeah. This really feels like a celebrity's first home once they finally became a celebrity. It feels like a really nicely curated hotel, but it doesn't necessarily feel like a home to me. It's beautiful. I enjoy looking at it, but it doesn't, there's just something missing about it. Like there's that personal touch that, you just can't quite put your finger on until you see it. And this is missing that. This feels like your second apartment. Like you finally invested into a pretty bed. You've got some nice sheets, you've got a bedspread, but this side table here in the back, that looks like it's from IKEA. And that's okay. Maybe you got that in college or for your first apartment, and it's so simple that I'm not mad at it. I like the interesting lamp, and you're starting to collect art, which is clearly a good thing. This painting of the hand is reading very gay, which I love. So this living room feels like the space of someone who has absolutely made it financially, and they know themselves really well. They know what their style is. They know what they like, because this is a very cohesive space. Would I ever want to live in this space? No. But it's a very cohesive space with a very specific design style. Clearly, this person knows the type of art they like. They want to invest in that kind of art. And it's a very unique style. It's something I've never seen before, which is why I can tell that this person knows themselves. This bookshelf area feels very much like your middle-aged, middle-class parents who have just been collecting things over the years and know how to curate it really well. This feels just as collected and curated, just in a different style. These two bedrooms feel very early in life and young, in the sense that you're still figuring out your style. You're not necessarily putting a ton of emphasis on it right now, but you want your space to feel cozy. I definitely don't love these bright green walls, but that's one of those things where sometimes you just need to play around with things and figure things out, see what you like, see what you don't like. Maybe you don't have money to paint your room back to a different color, so you just have to live with the green walls, and that's part of learning about who you are. Number 4 is not splurging on that one thing that will just really, really tie the room together. I recently bought this rug that it kind of makes me hesitate because it feels like a weird size. It's maybe not the most versatile piece, but it just looks so good in my room. This was my recent splurge. It is a brand new wool rug. It was like $500, which is more than I would usually want to pay for a 5x8 rug. But considering I found my bed frame literally for free, I think splurging on this one thing that my feet will touch every single day is totally worth it. I definitely touched on this in my last video, but number 5 is putting your art somewhere expected, right? Somewhere normal, somewhere boring. It's just so much more interesting to put art in a weird random spot where you wouldn't think to put it normally, but it just works. So like leaning on top of your upper kitchen cabinets, or even literally just drawing on the walls, hanging your art on a door, putting some art like weirdly close to each other, finding something with very specific dimensions to fit a very specific space, and playing around with size are all so much more interesting to me. The 6th mistake is thinking that you need to rush to fill a house full of furniture and buying everything just so that you can have something functional. And function is important. Believe me, function is important. But our coffee table right now, and for the foreseeable future, is just one of these Costco totes, and that's fine. Mistake number 7 is having lots of small plants instead of like 1 or 2 big plants. Small plants can work if you have a really small space, and by really small, I mean like a van or bus conversion. Like small. But if you have a normal apartment with normal height ceilings, if you can even find just one place to put a giant tree, whether it's real or fake, I don't even care, as long as it looks decent. Find one plant or tree that goes almost all the way to the ceiling. You'll thank me. And if you do already have a ton of little tiny plants and you don't want to get rid of them, put them all onto one shelf or one windowsill. Corral them into one corner. Do something with them to make them all feel like one cohesive thing rather than a ton of little things scattered everywhere. And even if you're going for a jungle vibe, I promise you can do that without having like 50 4-inch pots. I promise. Just get some bigger plants in there. Mistake number 8 is ignoring senses and elements and materials. Maybe your space looks pretty, but does it smell nice? Does it feel pleasant emotionally? Do you have almost exclusively wood and fabric in your space, and maybe you need to bring in some more metal and stone? The place we just moved into has literally the worst countertops I have ever seen in my entire life. They're this like really ugly faux grass cloth print. It's very yellow, and the counters were installed horribly, and so there's just like chips and nicks and poorly cut edges, and it's so bad. So unfortunately, I think I am going to cover them in peel and stick. I know I hate it, and it's marble because, of course, it's so hard to find good peel and stick, and so I just want something that will at least neutralize the color of the countertops. But one other way that I'm bringing real marble into my space is that I've got a cute little marble box just for like trinkets and whatnot, and that's an affordable way to bring real marble into your space when you're on a contact paper budget. I really love how they played into the materiality of what they were working with. Obviously, they're not going to get something super expensive, but having a plywood and calling attention to the fact that it's plywood is a really interesting move. I definitely feel like this fireplace, like sitting room area, has way too much metal going on, at least for my personal taste. I think it's a very cohesive space. It really brings attention to the fact that there is so much metal in the space in a context where metal is not the expected material, right? Most fireplaces are made out of stone or brick or something like that, and metal is just very unique in this circumstance. This is one that I would personally never do in my home, but I do think it looks interesting, and it could be functional depending on what you're doing in your bedroom. This leather bedspread with leather pillows, I find fascinating. I never would have thought to use leather for an entire bedspread, but what do you know? I think it works. This is a really good example of how mood lighting and the height of the lighting and the temperature of the lighting and everything can really contribute to the overall emotional feeling of the space. The space feels very dark and warm and cozy and safe, and the lighting has a lot to do with that. And then, of course, being a home designer who's interested in off-grid living, I have to bring an earthship in here at one point or another. Everything is so intentionally used, from the glass that lets in a lot of sun to the dark slate floors, which literally act as a thermal battery bank to release heat during the night when it gets cold. Everything is so intentional, and the materials are so important in that. And then, of course, plaster walls will always be a very specific vibe. They have a specific feel. They have a specific, like, emotional connection to a lot of people, I think. And I'm pretty sure this is actually a picture from Georgia O'Keeffe's house. Number 9 is forgetting about the ugly colors. Colorful doesn't mean bright and saturated. It just means full of color. This postmodern Gen Z way of doing colors is not the only way that you can have a colorful space. You can still have a very colorful space that doesn't feel bright and in your face by having muted and muddy colors, which muddy is maybe not the most enticing descriptor, but it works. When you look at this blue and red, they look relatively bright, but if you were to look at those colors on a color wheel, they're actually quite desaturated. One really effective way to bring in color is to keep everything else really neutral, white walls, wood furniture, and then having a pop of red or orange. It gives you that pop you need. It gives you the like, ooh, color, so that your space isn't boring, and it's very simple and effective. Always works. Okay, I can't not talk about Paige Wassell's bedroom. It's so simple, but everything is so specific. It's all in the details, and the colors are very, very strange, but they all work so well together. Like, I would consider most of these colors ugly colors when you pick them out on like a color picker online, but they just work. And finally, mistake number 10 is poorly framed art. It doesn't matter what art you have. It doesn't matter if it's a postcard. It doesn't matter if it's something you clipped out of a magazine. If you frame it really well, it will look like real art. I really love a chunky frame or a chunky mat, or doing something interesting like wallpapering the frame and mat to make it kind of integrate itself into the art and make the whole situation a little bit more interesting. Colored mats and frames are good. If you've got some sentimental handwriting, that's always a good option. Again, you don't have to go fancy with any of this stuff. Just being intentional about how you're framing your art. I think one of the most important things is just choosing a frame that's actually big enough for your art. For example, I wouldn't want to go any smaller on the mat right here. I would love something even bigger, but this mat, I wouldn't want to go any smaller with that because I feel like it would just seem kind of unintentional. And it would feel like I just slapped something in a frame just to get it on the wall, which is not what you want to do. Like I said in my last video, we're all making at least one of these design mistakes. And I just use the word mistakes to mean things that we can improve upon. Our homes are such personal spaces that really all that matters is that you love it. And I'm just a person on the internet giving out my random opinions. So obviously if there's something you don't agree with, don't take my advice. Let me know down in the comments which of these mistakes you're making, and I will see you down there. I will post a comment and pin it saying which of these mistakes I'm making, which I haven't actually looked at yet, so we'll see what that is together. Bye.